Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Francisco de Agostino. He works in business development and he associates with entrepreneurs and helps them enter new markets and grow their businesses. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Stuart. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you. We just got into a very, very interesting conversation before we started recording. We had to immediately stop it so we could get it recording about new technologies and the creators of these new technologies like Oppenheimer or more contemporary creators of very powerful new technologies that are coming out right now and how they have guilt and all these complexes about what they've created. Can you fill my audience in on more about what your thoughts are on this?
Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, I mean, history tends to repeat itself, like they always say, right? And I think that what we are seeing basically on AI, the new diva of technology, is basically the applications. One of the things that I always like to focus on when I do the business development is find new applications of an existing product that will gain new markets for my clients or my associates and expand their business. And the applications that we can see in AI are very wide and are very diverse. And that diversity, I guess, it's what is causing a sort of paranoia and at the same time a logic preoccupation, worry. And I think that this is very relatable to what we were talking about Oppenheimer. I mean, for those who do not know who he is, he's the inventor of the atomic bomb. He helped United States gain Japan's surrender in 1945 with the use of the atomic bomb, specifically in Japan and Nagasaki, in Tokyo and Nagasaki, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was in Japan. Tokyo is the capital, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki, both of them were cities in Japan, and they were applied. And one of the most important things about this is that it has rewritten history in terms of the vision world has of nuclear energy. And Oppenheimer was very regretful of his own invention, but not because he didn't know that nuclear energy was good or what he was going into the moment he signed in with the team to build the bomb, because everybody knew what was going to be built at that place. Everybody knew that it was a sort of secret project of the United States government, and it was going to use for mass destruction. But they were also hopeful that that own project and invention will help new ways of using nuclear energy for new technologies. It's very comparable to what is happening right now with AI. AI is a very useful tool, and I am always a believer that technology is not bad in itself. It's the application of it, what is good or bad. I mean, if I give you a hammer right now, Stuart, would you use it to build a house, or would you use it to smash other person's head?
Well,
That's
probably build a house.
probably you will use it to
Who
build a
knows
house,
though?
of
I'm
course.
just kidding.
But it's up to your own decision and your usage of that tool. If that tool is going to be useful, good or not, right? And that is for me what is the key thing about not only nuclear energy and the atomic bomb, like I said with Oppenheimer, because he was very regretful of that, but also with the case of AI and the application of it. You can apply AI for very useful subjects, topics, and aspects of life, but also very harmful and very damaging for society. Nowadays, we're seeing both of it, both sides of it.
And so there's a few different ways we can go from this. We can talk more about that comparison. I'd be curious to hear more on. So there are some similarities between AI and nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, but there are also a lot of differences. And I would like to kind of map those out. I still haven't gone into this question myself, but it's a good question I think needs to be asked, and not a lot of other people are asking it. So let's go into that. So we've got this awesome technology that can basically own language, that can that can not necessarily speak or write better than human beings, because everybody kind of knows when they're interacting with an AI, and it's not the best writer. That might change in the future. But anything in terms of like engineering, science, anything that you're not an expert in, this thing is better at that than you are, including
Yeah.
programming. And it feels like programming is the main kind of threat that we have is cyber attacks. And this technology, and I think that's where OpenAI, we were talking before the show, that's where OpenAI is actually kind of thinking about this smart in terms of closing it, because as soon as the open source models start to produce what GPT-4 is like, and then it's totally open, then cybersecurity, then it will become a huge issue. But it's also just delaying the inevitable, because that's coming, and the open source are going to get there. And and if the closed source don't actually compete and let this stuff out, then the open source is going to win, because it's just so powerful. What do you think? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Anything, any nuance there?
It's a great question. Actually, I'm a fan of history. And as a fan of history, I'm always very keen on using the etymology of every word and the very description and definition of every word to understand what we're dealing with. When we are saying artificial intelligence, well, first, so I'm a strong believer in using whether it is the etymology or the very definition of a word in order to understand the nature of what we are dealing with. And when we are dealing with artificial intelligence, we are basically dealing with handmade, man-made, or not nature-made, if you like, intelligence. But what is intelligence? Intelligence, this is the very book definition of it,
Oh,
is the capability of generating information or knowledge with pre-existing knowledge
uh,
or data and using it for a certain purpose. So what we're dealing here is the capability of a machine or a non-human device to generate information, to not only create it, but also reason it
mhm.
based on algorithm, based on pre-existing information, based on pre-existing data, but it's all a process that is simulating what we humans have naturally, which is obviously reasoning, our capability of creating information, abstract information. And it's some sort of replication of it, but in this case by machines. And what machines do is they are better in doing the things that men already were doing before they existed. The machines, of course. So when machines start improving and bettering the usage of that information that we humans were using before, and I say this just like a crane would lift a car and we weren't able to lift a car, and a machine would be using informations better or more efficiently than a man. But at the same time, it would replicate a man's or a human, let's be correct with this, a human, it would replicate it and better it as a human would do it. But sometimes we humans use information for bad applications. Obviously, there is a subjective component to this, because where do we make the stance by saying what is good or what is bad? That's a sort of ethical debate that we're not going to go off the tangent with it. But I mean, the ethical debate is for another occasion, but it applies to understanding that for some people, some things are good, and for some people, the same things are not. And the artificial intelligence is just doing this, and the application of that knowledge that we are giving it and the way it's processing it and generating information for it is just based on replicating what we were doing before. So I think that there's an ethical component to this. It's very interesting to understand, but it's also something that we should be in causing and directing it, or at least the best we can, to a better application for society, if that makes sense.
It does. So I love that. And one thing that it ties in exactly with one of my favorite YouTube series by John Vervaeke, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. And he has a similar love of etymology that both of us share, which is essentially like, what do all these words mean? And I love the definition of intelligence. And you said intelligence is based on reasoning. And so what John Vervaeke does in his series is he goes through and he says, well, what is reasoning? And in order to come up with a scientific definition of something, whatever you're proposing can't rest on anything that is at the same level. Like you need to explain it in its component parts. And so reasoning, the definition of reasoning is the action of thinking about something in a logical, sensible way. And so there's another one. What's logical? What does that mean? And he gives a good definition. I'm not going to be able to pull it out of my ass right now, but he does give a good definition. And so there's also sensible and what makes sense, right? We use all these words, and the craziest thing about etymology, I tweeted the other day that etymology is by far the most psychedelic of the ologies, you know, as opposed to ontology, the nature of being, belief, how we think about the nature of belief. Sorry, the being, how we think about the nature of being, existence, awareness itself. And so, yeah, very beautiful. But then we have to think about logical reasoning, intelligence. What are all these things? And he comes up with some terms like relevance realization. So relevance realization is the insight that comes from when you pick out the most relevant parts of our environment. You know, our environment is filled with millions and millions of objects. We only pay attention to a small number of those. How do we do that? That's not a conscious process. That's like a process that is deeply unconscious. Parts of it are conscious, but not all of it. And so this is he did this series in 2018, and he was at the University of Toronto with some of the major AI scientists. And so he was in this scene, and he was seeing GPT-3 come out, and then he developed this beautiful philosophical way of analyzing it that is very important, that I'm going back and re-listening to. So yeah, I loved what you're saying. There's the subjective, objective, the ethical debate. I loved what you said about machines are better at doing the things that men have figured out how to do. For example, the crane. And then you said something really interesting, which I want to dig into, which is that this thing is going to get better and better at optimizing itself. And I think that's what most of the existentialists, existential risk people are worried about, because once it starts to improve itself, and in a sense it already is, like then it's no longer controllable. I'm of the belief that it's already out of control, that cat's out of the bag. Now it's just time to ride the roller coaster.
You're in the times of Terminator, right? Yeah, that's what you believe.
Oh man, I wonder if I should share my screen. There's a great meme. I'm not going to try it. I should do this in future episodes. I got to figure out how to bring those memes into it. But there's a great meme where on the top it says expectation, and then it had a Terminator guy, you know, with shooting missiles out of his hand, and you know, just total destruction and everything like that. And then on the bottom, it's the same Terminator machine, except he's in front of an easel with a painting and a paintbrush. And so then it says reality, expectation versus reality. It
Well,
turns out
that's
the
exactly
robots are just making art.
saying.
They're
Yes,
just making
and
art.
that's exactly what I was saying. We imagine ourselves with a T100, you know, looking for us and shooting at us, and trying to terminate us. But all in all, it only depends in how much of a good use we give it.
Yeah.
Right. But one thing that I want to pick from that you said, is about the decomposing of a word or
Mm.
what anything to
Mm.
understand its real nature.
Mm.
And I'm gonna give you a very very little example of this. And you also mentioned the more esoterical aspect of it. And I'm going to use the word religion and apply. You know what the
Ooh.
religion word comes from?
No, no, no.
Okay, the religion words come from its Latin word called religare, which is to relink, to transcend, is to be linked to God.
Mm.
And what we are looking for in a religion is our way to transcend and link to God.
Mm.
It's our connection and communication to God. The
Mm.
way we expressed it, the way we have throughout millennia ritualized it, manifested, or even process it and develop it, it was up to us. Some use it throughout institutions like churches, some use it through rituals or social groups. But all in all, the word in itself has never changed. Its actual essence has never changed. And religion is still the same, is our need as human beings to link to a higher truth, to a higher power.
Mm.
And call it God, call it the
In a,
universe, call it whatever you want.
but in a formalized way, right? Would
Yeah,
you say,
exactly. I mean,
yeah, in a ritual or a formalized way, some sort of institution, basically?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But the institution, that's a very good question that you mentioned, because actually the institutionalization of religion is a result of our natural social
Mm,
tendency
yes.
of life.
Yeah.
Because we are, like Aristotle said back then, we are a social animal and a political animal. Back already, this was being studied already in the ancient Greece. Uh, it is a sort of uh, inevitable results that we were going to gather in groups to share our common knowledge and gather uh, social experience and collective memorabilia of transcending and godlike and god linking events throughout history that
Mm.
would obviously enable and trigger our need to uh, manifest and sort of um, uh, recreate those events and worship them. So I guess that's sort of our natural social condition as human beings, but the word hasn't changed ever. And I think that artificial intelligence, the essence of it, is very clear. What we do with that essence, what we do
Yeah.
with that definition, with that nature,
Yeah.
it depends on us. That's how I wanted to leave. I didn't want to go too much off the tangent, but the explanation of religion for me is very applicable to this. Is the essence of artificial intelligence won't be changed. What we are going to be doing with it is completely up to us, and it depends on us as humans.
Yeah. 100% in agreement there. Uh, do you think that, have you seen any evidence of, or do you think in the future that people are going to start creating religions based on artificial intelligence? So are you familiar with what Nietzsche talked about when he said God is dead? You know, like he's like, okay, well, yeah, God is dead. From my interpretation, that what that means is that science killed God, that there is no way to believe in an all-powerful personal God anymore, because science showed us that it's all a deterministic universe except for quantum mechanics. That's the one problem with that statement, because quantum mechanics messes that whole thing up. And so God is dead. People are trying to turn all these things into religion, because we, as you said, we're all part of groups. We get into groups and we all connect with each other in order to transcend our humanity. And then we've lost God. God's dead. So like, what do we do? Do you think that people are going to start to use that, replace God with AI?
Oh yes, definitely. And your question has opened me a lot of windows that I want to try to shut them down in order to not go too much off the tangent. But
Please do go on the tangent. You can go on the tangent.
yeah, the most memorable knowledge and notion that we can get from Nietzsche is the Superman, the superhuman that he always believed in. But what is the superhuman? Is it Superman coming off the window? No, it's not. It's some sort of group or person who is capable of imposing his will of power.
Mm,
So those who manage technology and those who are more powerful, and AI will be a great tool for this, will be the ones imposing their own will of power.
man.
And
Yeah.
many people believe in God's will of power, of course, but we humans, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that one of the things that humans have as a condition that is different to the rest of animals or any living being out there is that we create necessities throughout history,
Mm,
necessities that make us separate ourselves from our natural habitat. For example,
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you something. Last week, my electricity went down. I have a shortcut, and I felt like I was literally empty. I couldn't do anything. I had no internet. My phone wasn't going to be able to be charged, and I felt like I was completely crippled.
Yep.
And uh, I
Yep.
thought to myself, 500 years ago, people were living without any of these things, but now I can't live without them. So I think that we humans have this ability to create new necessities, but at the same time, those necessities separate us from a natural habitat. Because
Mm,
sometimes I think that when we build cities, too much concrete and everything, we are separated from nature. And this is why we have more anxiety now than ever, that we need to get an escape to a beach, to a forest, to a mountain, to just clear our heads and calm down. Because we don't have that. But back then, you know, we were living there, so we didn't have to go and get it. We already have it. So what I mean is that humans create these necessities, but they also create figures, and they change, or they believe they change sometimes uh, the course of human condition and conduct and
mm,
behavior.
mm.
And I guess that this will of power, the AI, will eventually develop and expand to a point where people will be using it to create a new order of living, I guess. And maybe
Oh.
that will kill God and itself. It will make it so dependent on AI, or
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah. Yeah.
guessing. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have the
Yeah.
crystal
Yeah.
ball to know this, but it will kill the need of explaining something divine, or relinking to a higher power, because we will
Interesting.
be able to satisfy or believe that we satisfy everything with technology.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so either the AI becomes the God, or AI takes the Nietzschean God is dead one step further and completely
Yes,
eliminates God. Um,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I
very
mean,
interesting.
and obviously, if you think about it, God is dead is because people started to understand that the will of power lied on men.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh,
and
interesting. Yes. Yeah.
Nietzsche was obviously an atheist, and so I think that he was very keen on making people understand that the will and the power was always dependent on human beings, and the reason why a god existed is because there were humans worshiping it.
Yes.
And when I got,
Yes.
I
Interesting. Yeah.
once
Mhm.
asked myself, what makes a God powerful? Is it the thing he's a god of, or the worship of the people
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Okay.
the
This is
people
great.
who follow it?
This goes back to the
So
question. Yeah. Go for it.
the will of power that a God imposes is what actually makes it powerful in itself.
Yep. Yep.
So the more followers a god or a religion or a way of interpreting a god has, the more power it will have. So I guess that when God is dead, what Nietzsche mean is that he is killing that need of men to be imposed some sort of higher power, and the man was the one who imposed the power. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I sort of interpret it as him trying to understand that men were God, and men and the superhuman was the only one who was able to impose that notion and concept
Mm,
of power. So that would get rid of the need of a God. You know what
mm.
I mean?
Yes. So this is a great question, and it goes back to the conversation we were having about subjective versus objective values, morals, and ethics, and also the conversation on quantum theory and quantum mechanics, because I just only recently found out this last week that the Einstein was such an interesting figure because he destroyed modern physics with relativity, became famous for it, and then once Niels Bohr came around and said, wait, but look at what the electrons are doing around the atom. You, Einstein, you think that these are actually traversing the atom as if it were a solar system. So at least as if the electrons were planets and the atom was the sun. So and Niels Bohr told Einstein, "You're wrong. Like this isn't real. Those electrons aren't until you observe the electron. You have no idea. It's just a mathematical probability. And the very aspect of observation changes the electron, changes where the electron is. So once you've measured it, you have changed that electron. And so there's the subjective objective thing. There basically, I mean, in our material world, the objective world is there, but there's a lot of
Yeah, I mean,
open questions.
it's actually very, what you just said is actually very relatable to the existence of a God. Like Nietzsche can say that God is dead and now the power lies on men, but no matter how powerful men can get, there will never be God. And science will never be able to explain how an explosion like the Big Bang originated out of nowhere.
Mm,
Like the very explanation of the Big Bang is an absurd in itself, if
mm,
you actually think about it.
mm,
How can something explode if there's no explosion triggered or elements that would trigger the explosion? It just can happen unless it is some sort of pre-existing divine power or a sort of entity that triggered it.
mhm.
So, like I said, religion, science, it all comes to a very same place in the end. And I think that you will never be able to get rid of the objective. You can go through the subjective through many paths and ways of explaining that. But the objective is the objective.
Mm.
And there's no way of denying that there is an absolute truth, undeniable truth about it. And I
The
mean, we are going to a very deep theological and philosophical concept that, going back to AI, is that artificial intelligence is a sort of tool, and that's objective. Nobody can deny that. It could be very helpful or not, but that's not depending on AI itself. It depends on the people who use it
mm.
and how they use it.
So this gets into a good question now. I would love to take the last 10 minutes or so to talk about business and what you do, and anything you can share about business development, because I personally also identify as doing business development, although for the past year I've been doing knowledge management, which is a deeply philosophical business thing, which also means it's totally ignored inside of the organization because the business is all about like hardcore objective metrics and facts and stuff like that. Knowledge is this abstract thing that's really important, but nobody can pin down exactly how it's important. So it can't be measured. It can't be doing all these different things. So what have you learned about business development? And what's the most interesting thing you've learned about business development in the last month or so?
One of the most important things that I've learned is that no matter how much metrics, data, facts, or any sort of mathematical method that you can use to grow your business or expand the applications of any product or itself, it all lies in humans at the end. Humans taking decisions. Markets, any market, no matter how technical, how sophisticated, how technological it can be, it's all based on humans making the decisions to buy or to sell. And you should always take that into consideration. And when it comes to humans, you have to have a more uh, anthropological, sociological point of view to it, and understand the way of thinking of humans, that there's no right or wrong. There's no like a sort of law or axiom when it comes to human thinking. It can always vary depending on culture, depending on the taste, depending on the moments that the person, emotions the person is going through, anything. And it's very important to understand that. And if you actually let me give you a sort of very, very short example, I can tell you this. I was expanding a business in Paraguay, and here the business, when I established it here in Argentina, it was very successful. Profits were very good. It grew very fast. And when I took it to Paraguay, I said, okay, so Paraguay doesn't have the economic problems that Argentina has. It has a very big market because if although it is not as big as Argentina because it's only 6 million people, they have a very good economic condition to and tax condition because they don't have too many taxes. So it was very, very good in terms of on papers. It was fantastic. There was one thing that I didn't consider into my equation or
The
analysis
people.
is that people
Yeah.
don't trust in Paraguay that easily.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
you can, and they're very conservative when it comes to new technologies.
Yeah, yeah.
So like what would be the PayPal of Paraguay, which is an application, a tool called Pagopar, wasn't that successful, although it's very efficient, very comfortable, very easy and quick. It didn't grow that much because people were used to buying with cash or
Wow.
credit card. So they didn't want to change that. So the
Yeah.
culture of a Paraguayan is very conservative. And it takes longer for a Paraguayan to understand that something is better, to change it, and to start applying it. And now, and there you can see that a business that on papers is very good and it has already been tested in other countries and worked, not necessarily works everywhere.
Yeah.
So you have to understand, and this going back to the question itself, is that human thinking is key to be analyzed and to understand how a market works
Yes.
in
And
any
it's
business.
and it's so funny tying it up, going back to that the first part is that, AI, a lot of people say that AI is going to essentially remove all of our jobs, remove our importance, remove all those different things. But what they always seem to leave out is that, yeah, there are a bunch of machine problems. So there are a bunch of problems with the machines that we use. A lot of those are about to go away, but we have so many people problems. Like there are so many problems with people. Those aren't going away anytime soon. Like all of those problems are still going to be very, very valuable problems to solve because it's all based on humans, and humans are absolutely absurd, which is great and horrible. But yeah, so it's those aren't going away
You're still
anytime
going
soon.
to be needing food. You're still going to get hungry. You're still going to need to sleep. So
And those
we're
are just
still,
the material problems, right? Those are
yeah.
just the material human problems. And then we've got all these other psychological and sociological and problems that are just, and it's so funny in business. I have this great question for you the last 5 minutes or so. How do you think businesses are going to change based on this new technology? For the last 300 years, businesses have been very successful by growing very, very large, and essentially getting to a point where they no longer can easily die. How do you think that AI will change that, if at all?
Well, for the first time, and this it might sound like as a joke, but I think that AI, one of the greater things that gave to humankind is laziness, because
Yeah.
it has made things so easy and so quick and accessible that if you think about it, now we are doing half the works that have been needed to be done 300 years ago. So I think that if you think about here from here to 100 years from now, AI will simplify even more some of the tasks and work that we have to do. It will improve it, it will facilitate a lot of things, but at the same time, it would give this notion to people, and I think this is very detrimental. I'm not saying that this is good. It will give this notion to people that everything can be solved with technology. That if a machine can think for me, then why do I have to think for myself? If a calculator can do the math for me, then why do I have to learn math? It's some sort of this concept that I think is very detrimental. I mean, social media is another example. If I can relate and establish my social relationship throughout a computer or my cell phone, why do I have to go and meet out people? Why do I have to go and do programs? Why do I have to meet a significant other if I can get 10 girls on Tinder or men or partners or whatever you want to do? I mean, this is what technology, not only AI, but technology in itself and the advancements of it has given humans in the last 20 to 10 years, which is the pinnacle of development so far. It has given this idea that to humans that everything should be easy, quick, and doesn't need any job to be done.
And it's another dependency, just like you were mentioning, the electricity went out. About 3 years ago, I tried to remove all the dependencies from my life and realized that it was extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult to get totally off grid. And there's a few reasons, which is that it goes back to those material problems of human beings, is that food, shelter, electricity, warmth, those things like all require consumables that are really, really difficult to store for long periods of time. Food is easy. Food is easy. You just get a lot of dry foods. You get a lot of rice, a lot of those things, keep them protected from animals. And you can also use a freezer if you want to freeze meat. But then that introduces a new one, which is that you need electricity in order to, and then and then you can get a generator. But then how do you get the fuel for the generator? You can either use propane or you can use gasoline. Gasoline goes bad. If it's diesel, it can last for 1 to 2 years. And then you can, put a large tank. So it can also become rapidly very, very expensive as well to do this. So like only the Zuckerbergs can actually afford enough to actually do a real scenario. But so AI now is going to do that, is already doing it for knowledge. And is creating another dependency for knowledge, which is going to solve a lot of problems and might improve our ability to prepare for challenges in the environment.
Exactly. It's what we were. It was what we were talking about. Human niche, like niche, human and superhuman willpower. AI will be doing this. It will generate this wheel of power, saying, "You depend on me," and this.
Interesting. That's a good
we will be depending on AI, and AI will be sort of immersed in our day-to-day life to the point where we will be needing it. Like, for example, now we don't need to know the streets around the corner because we have the GPS. I'm a victim of this. I admit it. I live in a neighborhood called Recoleta here in Argentina, and I don't even know the streets 5 blocks away from my place. Because I have this GPS, I just put the address on my GPS and it takes me right away. So I don't need to know where to go or how to take the best route for it, because just AI or like GPS does it for me.
It's gonna be a crazy world. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And how can people find out more about what you're working on?
Well, you can Google me you can search for me on Instagram. It's at Pancho_D'Agostino. That's my personal account. And if you want to hit on my profile on LinkedIn, it's Francisco D'Agostino. It's with capital D, apostrophe, capital A, Gostino.
Great. I just followed you on Instagram. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stuart. It's been a pleasure.